Good morning, everybody. We'll bring the June 19th, 2012 Pennington County Commission meeting to order. Would you please stand for a moment of silent reflection, and then the pledge led by Commissioner Busker.
Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda today is the review and approval of the agenda for today's meeting. Is there any additions or corrections to the agenda?
Yes, I'd like to add, I think we all got a copy of this letter from Jackson concerning Jackson Heights housing, and I'd like to have that added to the agenda to discuss it.
Or would you like to have that as a...
I don't care.
Put it under,
19, item from the chair.
yeah.
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 Okay, anything else?
I move to approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
Motion and a second. Is there discussion? All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. The Board of County Commissioners of Pennington County uses a consent agenda on some items that are non-controversial and routine items that are quickly handled. Items 5 through 9 today are on the consent agenda, and anyone, the county commissioners or anyone from the audience, can ask to have an item pulled from the consent agenda. First, the 5 items are 5 through 9 are minutes of the regular meeting of June 7th, approval of the vouchers for today, approval of the chairman's signature on the employees' agreement with Boston Mutual Life Insurance Company, order for organization and corporation, Blue Wing Road District from the auditor's office, and approval of the purchase off of state bid list for credential tracking equipment for emergency management. Is there anything that anyone would like to have pulled from those? Anybody from the audience? Entertain a motion.
Move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Is there discussion? All in favor of that motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. We'll go to item 10 on the agenda today, and that's a recognition and thank you from the Sheriff's Office. I believe is handling that. And Brian, thank you.
Hello, Brian Mueller. I'm the Chief Deputy with the Pennington County Sheriff's Office. And thank you for letting us come in front of you today to recognize some agencies both within Pennington County and outside of Pennington County for their efforts in coming together on the search for this missing boy we had here in Pennington County a couple of weeks ago. You know, oftentimes we come in front of the county commission and we're talking about exciting things like asking for additional FTEs and budget supplements and those types of things. And I don't think we do a good enough job of sharing the success stories and things that happen that we're used to seeing every day on the streets as far as interagency cooperation and people coming together to provide the citizens of Pennington County and Rapid City area with the type of quality service that we do every day. So first, I'd like to thank you for giving us the equipment, the personnel, and the resources to handle things like this. And then I want to move into talking about this incident just a little bit and recognizing some of these agencies. And then we will clear out most of your meeting room here and let you get back to work. So on May 28th, the Pennington County Sheriff's Office received a call of a missing boy up at the Deerfield Lake area. And we get several of these types of calls a year, and usually they resolve themselves within the first few hours. This one was a little bit unique. We were not sure if this boy was in the lake or outside of the lake. His name was Justin Lewis, and he was from that Deerfield area. And first, I'd like to call the Pennington County Search and Rescue folks up here, Rick Lehman and Tammy Stottle, team leaders, and they have several members here today. Two folks come on up. All of you can come on up. Search and rescue people, come on up. When we get into a search of this magnitude, especially for young people. People really come out of the woodwork and really want to help through the first few days of one of these, and this search was no exception. Through the first 3 days, we had probably close to 400 people from different agencies that were involved in this search. People from the Sheriff's Office, Search and Rescue, of course, Civil Air Patrol, several volunteer fire departments, Game Fish and Parks, Rapid City Police Department, Rapid City Fire Department, family members from the Lewis family and friends and neighbors, and just hundreds of people show up to help with those types of searches. And if you haven't been to one of those, I'd encourage you to come out the next time we have one and see all of the effort and coordination that goes into making sure that we can search those areas carefully and in an effective manner to ensure that if somebody is there, that we can find them. And over the past 17 years, I've had many opportunities to work on large-scale searches with Pennington County Search and Rescue, and they're a top-notch organization. And their people, as you know, volunteer their time out to come out and do this. And through this operation, Rick Lehman and Tammy Stottle, the team leaders up there, just really did an exceptional job of coordinating things up there. And we'd like to thank them for their time and the hours that they put in. Search and Rescue donated over 500 hours on this one incident that lasted 17 days in Pennington County. I'd like them to introduce the rest of their staff that's here today, and we'd like to give them a round of applause.
Take a quick turnaround for the camera over there so the news people can get you.
Rick or Tammy, you want to introduce who you brought with you here today?
With us today, we have Christine Backens and Kathy Brousseau. They both worked to make sure that we had all the people who were out on that search accounted for. Like Brian said, we had over 500 people, and every single person was accounted for at the end of the day when we went home. So very good job to those guys.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to bring Regional Supervisor Mike Kentai from Game Fish and Parks up here. And the rest of Mike's staff that helped with the search up there is up in Lemon doing some regional training this week, so they couldn't be here. But like I said, it's easy to get people to come and help with this through the course of the first few days when we're calling it a search. But unfortunately, as we get a few days into this, and it was evident to us that this young boy was in the lake, and our operation turned into a recovery operation, it becomes more and more difficult to reach out to other agencies and ask them to continue to contribute manpower to something like this. You know, day 3, 4, 5, week 2, week 3. And like I said, this search went on 17 days. And I talked to Mike during the first full day of operation up there early in the morning. They offered to bring out their side scan sonar unit that was housed in Pier. He had people on it immediately. And before the first operational period was over, they had people up there helping us with the search. And Game Fish and Parks stuck through to the very end of this. They had people up there nearly every single day, and their office contributed over 500 hours of man time into this search. They had equipment breakdown. They shipped more equipment in here from Sioux Falls. And we've always worked closely together with them, but we've never had an opportunity to work for this extended period of time on this type of a search. And we just could not have done it without Mike and his crew, and we'd like to thank them today. And next, I'd like to bring up some folks from the Rapid City Pennington County Water Rescue Team. Come on up. They brought quite a crew in here today. As you know, our joint water rescue team is comprised of members from the Rapid City Fire Department, the Pennington County Sheriff's Office, the Rapid City Police Department, Pennington County Search and Rescue, and they do have some volunteers on the organization. Right now, the fire department has oversight over that team, and they have a pretty active group. Brian Pavandra is the team leader. Assistant Chief Rod Seals on the team. I'll let one of you guys come up and introduce the rest of your team members.
Here today we have Kalen Meningas, Jeremy Stoffaker, Rod Seals, Dustin Willett, and Jeff Andrews.
And like the Game Fish and Parks, they also were up on day one helping us with the search. And when our operation turned from more of a search operation to a recovery operation, they really kicked into gear and provided a lot of different resources to us, from helping us with the out-of-area dog teams, providing platforms to take the dogs out on the water, putting people in the water, searching points of interest. They were really phenomenal. Rapid City Fire Department really stepped up, And their agency alone donated close to 400 hours to this search effort. The dive team together put in over 650 hours in 17 days up there. And that's just phenomenal to have a resource like that here locally that we can call up that's willing to drop what they're doing, backfill their full-time positions, and come up and help us out for that extended period of time. So I'd like to thank the water rescue team. And lastly, I'd like to bring up three deputies from the Pennington County Sheriff's Office: Sergeant Greg Foster, Corporal Todd Batest, and Corporal Mark Osborne. As you know, when we get an operation like that in Pennington County, it's the Sheriff's Office responsibility to have some oversight and help hold things together through this period of time. And we had several key people, I'm not going to bring all of them up there, that were involved in this 17-day operation. But the three people that you see here standing here in front of you today had kind of a unique role. They oversaw the supervisory duties related to the Sheriff's Office up there at the search each day, but more importantly, they were the main liaison to the Lewis family, explaining to them day after day what we were doing with the search efforts, getting feedback from them, and just spending time with them, which is pretty difficult to do, as you can imagine, dealing with a family that's not sure whether their son initially is alive or dead, and then on whether or not we're ever going to find him. So these three individuals standing in front of you here today just did a real phenomenal job representing Pennington County and the Pennington County Sheriff's Office to the Lewis family and to the liaison to all the people that were helped with the search up there. So we'd like to thank them today. Well, that's all I have for you today. Thank you very much for allowing us the time to come in front of you this morning.
Thanks for coming, Brian, and thank you to everyone that was involved in this search. It was a phenomenal situation, and you'd never like it when it ends up like it did, but still, it's a closure for the family, and finding the young man was something else. I'd like to know more about the dog situation someday when you have time, but it's a great bunch of people. Thank you. Okay, item 11 on the agenda today is establishment of Rushmore Regional Rail Authority. Mr. Randy Kramer, President, Deadwood Biofuels. Morning.
Morning, how are you?
Pretty good.
I'm Randy Kramer from Deadwood Biofuels. We're the wood pellet plant out on the south side of town where Dakota Craft used to be. If anybody's familiar with that. Lindell Peterson and Ben Snow came out to the plant a couple weeks ago, and I briefed them on a opportunity where the state rail board is considering, or has approved actually, a loan to install rail siding at our site to export wood pellets coming from the Black Hills, made from ponderosa pine, mainly from pine beetle kill. So this has a collateral effect, I suppose, of what's going on in the Black Hills, but the point is that to make the pellets move quicker, we've established contracts in both Wisconsin and Massachusetts. We've been shipping rail car loads of wood pellets for them to fill bags in those locations. And these are long-term agreements. And this is in addition to local fulfillment of contracts we have for bag product. So we are really moving in the right direction. But to take that next step, we need to install some rail siding, as opposed to trucking the pellets down to the rail. And it seems to make a lot of sense. When Ben Snow we first talked about this, he came up with the idea of presenting what could be a regional rail authority. That's necessary for us with this loan to begin with, but to expand the description and the purpose of the authority across the spectrum of western South Dakota, and that would do a couple of things. One is obviously it fundamentally helps the project along and moves the pellets out, as we've discussed here, but also it sets up a platform for future operations of rail spur activity. Besides us, so it's not about just this project. It's a larger scope that could, and I say could, be a fulfilling asset for this region to bring in products and take out. One example would be the oil boom that's going on north of us right now, as that, and we all believe that it could progress further south. There's limited rail ability or capability in this region, and one of the benefits of having the Canadian Pacific in Rapid City and a connection down to Crawford, Nebraska, which is rarely used, by the way, would be to transport products in and out of this region for that purpose, along with the forest products industry. It's not just the pellets that we're talking about. Forest products next to us could benefit from that. We've had some preliminary discussions that need to be discussed further, but these are all ideas that need to be brought forth. But before we do that, we need some help with an authority. So what is an authority? I've actually put some slides together. Hopefully you've all had a chance to look at those. But sure, thank you. As I said, we've had a resolution signed by the governor approving the loan for this project. But to facilitate the loan, you need two taxing subdivisions, political subdivisions. In this case, we've started to look at both the county and the city of Rapid City. And again, if somebody in Meade County or someplace down south in Custer County where the rail goes through wanted to have their own rail spur, they could use this authority to have a pass-through for their loan. But there's a step process where you need to get it approved by the state and at the same time set up the authority and get their blessing on it. So at this point, I guess if you can go to the loan terms and structure, right there. Our project is at the approval for ours was $375,000, $600. And it's a 15-year, it's advertised at 2% with annual payments of $29,500. So as we go, what we're paying to pay the trucker to get down to the rail siding could well cover these payments. But the point is that their annual payments, they've been approved, but to get the loan executed, we need to have the authorities established. So my first step here was to come to the county commissioners. I think Ben has been talking, and we've surely notified the city that would be next on our agenda, is to have this as a project, I guess, for the commissioners and the city council to work together on to see, first of all, if it's something that could be approved here, and then secondly, look at the broader vision of economic development for this part of the state. So there's a step that has to happen here. I think Mr. Peterson's intent was to get this before the commission as a first glance, not any action but more information than anything else, and then second, have a second meeting once we've had a chance to talk to the city. And so the authority would actually have members from both the commission and the city council on it. And obviously you want an odd number of either 5 or 7. There's 23 of these authorities established across the state of South Dakota, and they've been going on since the early 80s. And none have defaulted. This didn't come from me. This came from the State Rail Board. What happens is that the project owner co-signs on this loan with the authority. And so the payments are obviously made by the project to pay for the spur. A collateral position can be had by the authority. So in the event of default, you'd have some collateral that you could either sell the spur later on or rent it or use it for some other purpose. So there is some provisions for collateral there. And again, you have a co-signer with the project. If there's a loan agreement that's set up between the company and the authority. And so that obviously all gets submitted to the state, and that's what gets put in place. I think let's go to the slide repayment. It's just the next slide. So you can see that right now, the numbers for us, how do the payments get made on an annual basis, the bottom line being the last bullet here. But if you start at the top of what we're doing right now, and really, it's really difficult to make 6 rail cars a week by trucking it to the rail siding, but we've got contracts for that. And so once we've had our rail line established, our rail spur, which is anticipated by the mid to late August, we can begin to fulfill all 6 as opposed to 2 to 4 a week. We have to have 4 trucks that go down there for each rail car, so it's 100 tons that go in each car. So that it adds up very quickly when you've got trucks by the hour, and that really, the math of this is the second from the bottom of how that looks. So you can see that if we needed to make a payment of $29,500 a year, we're really spending at the rate we're going right now at $160,000. Now, really, we haven't gone that long to do this. It's only been since the beginning of April. But if we start to look forward, it's in everybody's best interest that we get the project done quickly. Just to the next slide, here's the organization. This is the template for most of the other authorities that are out there. Again, you can have 7, but it probably, and I asked the question of the State Rail Board, how much time, if one of you or 2 of you or 3 of you were on that authority, how much time would it take from you during the course of a year? And it sounds like it's about 1 or 2 meetings a year, depending on what's going on with the project. If everything's going fine, once a year, I think, is what they're anticipating. And if in the next meeting that you decide to take this up on the agenda, Bruce Lindholm from Pier will be here to answer those questions in full detail. Are there any questions so far?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sure.
If this was approved, when do you anticipate the spur would be completed?
Either way, it's an arrangement. It's a bit unconventional when it comes to expenditures, but we're able to fund the starting of the rail, and right now we're anticipating being done by the end of August.
Okay.
But I'm sorry to interrupt, but those funds then backfill whatever we've spent on the project.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if Deadwood Biofuels did default, is the county responsible?
The state.
Back the loan?
Yeah, the state would try to collect their funds from the company's assets first, and so you would have to. It's a question that came up, and as it turns out, that the state really is the one that would deal with the entity itself.
That didn't really answer my question. Would the county be liable?
I think the county is liable, no matter how you look at it, because there's a loan agreement, but you have collateral in the form of that spur.
Another thing I noticed, there's an authority for taxation. Do you have an explanation of how that works? What are we talking about? I was concerned about
Right.
that part of it. What are you really referring to?
If it's a remedy, it's something that the county can go to if there was no other remedy to recover the funds. Is that, again, this has not happened, but it's a provision where you could levy a tax to recover those funds. And maybe this goes back to answering your earlier question.
Well, kind of tied together. I'm curious how long your contracts are in these other 2 states. The payback is 15 years. How long are those contracts?
Right now, they're just for a year-to-year
Okay.
basis. But again, it's one of those things where you have to prove yourself to make sure that you can have an ongoing, sustainable deal.
And is any public comment period allowed in this process? Generally, we do things with public comment. I don't know.
Well, I certainly think that would be appropriate. I don't think that there's anything against that, certainly.
And I guess for me, I mean, you included some of possible agreements here, and I am, there are some questions that I had. I'm curious if our state's attorney has had opportunity. For me, before we go ahead, I'd want some legal advice on that.
Certainly. And again, this is more for information.
Okay.
And I think these are.
Just telling you where I would go from.
Right. I think the agreements, really, they're modeled after the others, that they had just done one in Han County, in Miller. And really, we took the language from that. And so I think certainly that the state's attorney would want to have a look at this.
Yeah, okay, those steps
Sure.
are kind of
And
important.
we'd expect that.
Okay.
Any other questions? Don?
So does Deadwood Biofuels then sign an agreement or a contract with the rail authority? Is that the way it goes?
Right.
Okay, so there'd be some kind of a signed agreement between that authority and your company
Right.
for this loan?
There's two agreements that we have. One is the establishment of the authority, which is the foundational organization, and then the second one is the loan agreement. I've also got a copy of that if you don't have that.
I would like
Draft.
that.
The draft loan agreement.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
you have somewhere here that says liability of the individuals on the Board of Commissioners is none. When you say Board of Commissioners, is that referring to us or to the 5-member governing Board of Commissioners as you have it?
I want to clarify that before I.
I would too,
spoke
because I
on
think
that.
the Northern Hills Railroad Authority has a serious question about the liability of the members of that board, because although we have insurance here, once we become a member of a governing, a different body, I don't think our insurance is any good. I also want to know if the authority has the authority to condemn property. I want to know why there's 3 city and 2 county people on there.
Really, it's up to the organization of how they want to form that. It can be 3, either one, or
And if
4
you
of either
have the
one.
money to build this thing, why are we going through all this process?
Well, it's a loan that it's,
No, you're getting a loan to build the spur originally,
right.
okay? As any private company should do,
Yes.
okay? I don't know why we're here then.
Well, first of all, it's the interest rate. It's a 2% loan as opposed to 6.
And my
it's
problem
not
with that
tax-
is that what this authority has is the authority to tax. In case you default, we're gonna go out and have your bill and your money you borrowed repaid by the taxpayers of this county.
But as the gentleman said, only, the other thing that the rail authority can do is go after the assets of that company.
Yeah, and by that time, usually there aren't any.
Well, I don't know, because we don't know what their assets are. I guess I wouldn't be so negative about it before we really truly understand.
Is there further,
I'm just asking
is there further
if the
further
state's
questions?
attorney would look at some of the questions I have.
I think we talked about that earlier.
Is there further questions of Mr. Kramer? Okay. Jay?
I was just curious, I guess I was just glancing at the resolution.
Jay, for the record, would you?
Oh, Jay Alderman with the State's Attorney's Office. As I was sitting here, I was looking at the resolution that's proposed for the county commission to enter, and there's just a couple items on there, I guess, for clarification. One, there's a reference to the city commission of Pennington County. It should be county
County,
commission.
surely.
And then I noticed from the board up here, it says 2 designated county commissioners, but there appears to be 3 spots on the resolution, so.
Right.
Is that so those can be changed?
Right, they can be changed, and there's no set rule on how many come from each organization. So I think that's another discussion, once we talk to the city to see if there's agreement there.
All right.
Thank you.
And then, just so I'm clear, what specifically would you like me to, I got whether the authority has a power to condemn, and was there another question that you wanted me to look into?
How, if there's a forfeiture of this situation, how do we go about recouping the taxpayers' money?
And liability of any members from this board that are placed on the authority.
I did, in reading that, I can read it again, but I do think that it's referencing, it's a little confusing because it uses Board of Commissioners, which we're used to, meaning you folks, but I think it is referring to the board, the authority board, the commissioners of the
I
authority.
think it is too, but I think that the Northern Hills Authority had some serious questions about that.
Yeah, there was lots of conversation about that, I think, earlier. Further questions? Anybody from the public have any questions of this item? Commissioner? Go ahead.
Randy, you'll get us a copy of the loan. Okay, great. I would like to see that.
Just,
Okay, thank you. I can make copies for everybody.
okay.
I guess I do have one other question for him. I'm looking at this resolution apparently that the governor signed and the State Rail Authority, and it talks about this $375,000 loan, and it's 15-year amortization, but it also says that there's a balloon payment due at 7 years of the remaining balance. So that's the way you're
That's the way we
looking
understood
at
it.
trying to structure it.
Yes, sir.
So even though it'd be a 15-year loan, you're looking at having a balloon payment in 7 years.
Right.
And if you can't make that, there is a risk whenever there's a balloon
Certainly.
payment in any loan.
Yes.
And if you can't make that balloon payment by refinancing, you would have it due, definitely.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, further questions? Okay, thank you for the information.
Sure. Thank you for having me over.
Next item, item 12 on the agenda today is the Pennington County Long Range Transportation Plan. And Lyle, you're presenting that today, I presume?
I am, thank you.
Okay. Would you identify yourself for the record, please? And
Absolutely. My name is Lyle DeVries. I'm with Felsberg Holt and Ulevig, consultant, tasked with preparing the Pennington County Transportation Plan. Give me just a couple minutes to set up here. I want to thank you for the opportunity to present today on the Pennington County Master Transportation Plan. This is also kind of nicknamed CHAPS, Connecting Hills and Plains Study. So I'll refer to it probably more in the shorter name, CHAPS, today. You received a package late last week, including the draft report and comments that have been made on the draft by the study advisory team. So hopefully you've had a bit of a chance at least to look it over. And what I present today won't be totally brand new. I'm going to try to be pretty efficient, but there is a lot of material here, so it'll probably take about 15 to 20 minutes to get through it all. Let's see, does this remote work? Excellent. And you can actually go full screen on the view. There you go. Thanks, Holly. Today's presentation, I'll go through a little bit of the project background, talk about the public involvement process that was undergirding every part of the project. We'll go through the draft report and some of the key findings and recommendations in that. A special piece of this project was a roadway management system. It's a software tool, so we'll spend a little time talking about that aspect. We'll talk about the comments we've received on the draft and then talk about next steps needed to finalize the plan. The plan was supervised by a group of study advisory team members. These SAT members were from a variety of agencies, and there's a consultant team as well. The SDDOT, Steve Graham and Peer headed up the project. Federal Highway Administration, Rapid City MPO, U.S. Forest Service also involved. And we had a good contingent of involved folks at a county level, led by Heine Junge, of course, and a number of other folks involved, Dan Jennison as well, as a number of other people in the highway department. So really appreciate the participation from that group. As I mentioned, my name is Lyle DeVries. I'm the consultant side project manager with Felsberg, Holt, and Ulevig, and FHU for short. Cattermas, Lee, and Jackson here in Rapid City also helped out on the plan, Mike Bender specifically, and then some others in some of their other offices. And 3 Points Consulting is a firm who helped with the software work on the roadway management system. I mentioned Steve Graham as the DOT project manager and myself as the consultant PM, and there's a project website as well that the DOT has hosted on its website. Well, at the outset of the project, we established a series of project goals in collaboration with the SAT. The first of those goals was to complete a list of transportation issues and needs. So to really document what's happening in the county now with respect to transportation, and in the future, what kind of needs are going to be triggered by future growth. That all feeds in then to a list of solutions, projects that can be implemented over the next 20 to 25 years to address those needs. And it's important to highlight here too that part of those efforts is to really promote a livable community that will enhance the economic and social well-being of Pennington County residents. So we're really emphasizing the role of transportation in quality of life. Third goal here speaks to the roadway management system, and this was really a lot of programming and software work in order to take what the county currently has in the way of road databases and information and coalesce all that into a really simple automatic tool that'll help the county highway department budget and plan for roadway maintenance needs. And then that all culminates in a series of final products that can be used by you, excuse me, and the DOT to guide implementation of transportation improvements within the area. Within those goals, there are a number of objectives that we came up with as well. With those solutions and projects, we want to be sure to evaluate and prioritize those. Access management is one of several standards that we wanted to take a look at as well. Access management really defining the spacing and type of access along roads of different types. AASHTO roadway design standards are a nationally accepted guideline that Pennington County uses now. We want to emphasize that in this plan. Safety improvements. Bicycle routes, that's something that really speaks to the multimodal nature of this plan. This was not just a plan centered around automobile transportation or truck transportation, but really focused on all the travel modes, transit, bicycle, pedestrian, all those different ways of getting around. Development is certainly an important component as well, that transportation infrastructure comes in place to support development at the time development occurs. So you're not going back and retrofitting things, which is more costly and time consuming later on to have to go back and say widen the road when it could have been done right at the outset of development. Major destinations, of course, in the county are a significant consideration as well in transportation. We followed a series of tasks to get through the process, and we started in July of last year. So this is really a one-year effort, and the contract is ending at the end of this month, so we're really right up at the home stretch here. We started our efforts with a baseline conditions analysis, getting a feel for what's out there now, and beginning to develop some of the standards that I mentioned. That whole process was supported as well by a series of public meetings that were held in October of 2011, meetings in Wall and in Hill City and here in Rapid City as well, to really understand from the public what some of the challenges and issues they have are, and also speak with some of the key stakeholders, folks who are representing some of the business owners in the county, as well as certain agencies were important stakeholders in the process. Then we moved into a future needs analysis and did some traffic forecasting focused on the year 2035 and determined what kind of problem areas were triggered by that growth to lead to a series of projects that could be implemented over time. And the second set of public meetings, you see all the public meetings and that process summarized in the bar along the bottom here. And the second series of meetings were held in April with the same round, Wall, Hill City, and here, and then sit-down individual meetings with the stakeholders as well. I mentioned public involvement. One of the key parts of this as well, we really didn't have very good attendance at our public meetings. So we did a little bit more outreach via an online survey. And that was fairly effective. We had some good response there. We had about 53 responses, most of which came from the area around Rapid City. And there were a lot of positive responses to how the transportation system currently functions, the condition of roads, the condition of intersections. A lot of people are pretty pleased with how the county is handling things now on a transportation level. There were a few problems noted in the midst of that. Speeding on a number of highways was noted as an issue by folks. and intersection safety. There were a few intersections that came out of that survey as locations where people have a little bit of trouble getting through safely. Most said that traffic congestion is a minor issue in the county. It's not a situation where during peak hours there's a massive influx of traffic that causes delay. Travel by bicycle and pedestrian modes was rated as poor by those who responded to the survey. And the survey respondents were also given the opportunity to respond as to what types of transportation improvements are most important to them. And they rated road improvements as most important. Several other types of improvements were rated pretty near to road improvements. And transit, at least in the survey, was rated as least important to those who responded. Should mention with respect to transit that there were a number of folks who came in later in the process and provided some real feedback of the importance of transit and the role that it plays in the county for those in particular who are dependent upon transit in order to make some important trips. Well, we conducted an inventory of existing conditions to review everything that's happening now at the county in terms of transportation. And that focused on these elements that you see here: traffic operations, that's really how are things flowing, is there delay, is there not delay, traffic safety, we reviewed crash histories at all the intersections in the county to see how crashes are happening and where more frequent locations are popping out. Reviewed transit and the providers who deal with transit in the county now, non-motorized transportation, and we spent a little bit of time, though more at a cursory level, on air transportation and freight. Just to highlight a few of the issues that we found in that inventory: roadway surfacing came up, in particular some roadways that are gravel surface that folks suggested should be paved and are actually demonstrating traffic volumes that would support the need for paving. Intersection operations and layout. There were a number of intersections highlighted that we flagged for more analysis, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. Incomplete pedestrian and bicycle network. The sense is that it's pretty difficult to get around the county on county highways if you're on a bike. You might be okay for a little while on a shoulder, and then the shoulder will end, and it makes for a little bit of difficulty in navigating around the county. Limited scope of transit service. Right now there are limitations on the times of day that people can get a ride and some of the locations where they can pick up a bus. So there's an interest in expanding that and a priority to that. Interagency communications also came out in a couple of our conversations with stakeholders that just a broader awareness of county activities on highways, whether it's maintenance or construction, is something that folks would be interested in seeing that could be enhanced. Future needs analysis. We took a look, as I mentioned, at year 2035 traffic forecasts and tried to identify whether there are particular needs triggered by that. So I'll discuss a little bit about that. First, focused on the study intersections. There are 15 total that were identified. 2 aren't shown on this particular graphic. But as you can see, most were located around the Rapid City area. And there's kind of a couple reasons why intersections made this list. The study advisory team focused on locations where there are geometric issues, that is, things like sight distance or really skewed angles of approach, issues of design and configuration. And then there's also a few that on this list due to traffic congestion, locations where volumes are kind of heavy and there might be a need for some kind of traffic control enhancements or other project to improve or reduce delay at those intersections. We came up with these results, these findings. Not all of those intersections demonstrated issues in need of correction, but there were a number that showed limited sight distance. That can be due to a number of things. It could be some trees along one of the approaches, could be some horizontal curvature of the road or vertical curvature, maybe kind of a landform in a corner or something like that. So we noted a few locations in need of improved sight distance, and skew angle is an issue at a number of intersections as well, where Minor Street might be coming in at a severe angle and it makes the intersection bigger. There are broad expanses of pavement there, and it's a little hard for people to navigate those locations by those sharp turns. Peak hour traffic congestion was shown to be a challenge at a few locations. You might not be surprised to see Sheridan Lake Road and Dunsmore on this list. There are a couple intersections along Sturgis Road at Universal and Merritt that are also experiencing some peak hour congestion either now or in the future. And then Highway 44 in Covington. Our traffic forecasts were based on a look at historic growth in the county and in particular areas within the county, and that growth is about 1.5% per year. So that was the rate that we applied to reach year 2035 traffic numbers. And we took a look at those numbers along various highway segments and related that to the capacity that's available on those sections now. So, for example, if a certain road is carrying about 5,000 vehicles a day and it's a 2-lane highway, the question is, does that 2-lane highway accommodate that number? And yes, it does. Those 2-lane highways accommodate about 10,000 to 15,000 vehicles a day. So we find there's a lot of green on this map, and that indicates that county highways are doing a good job now of handling the demand and are expected to continue to handle that demand into the future. So we're not seeing bottlenecks in the system that are triggered by future growth. Took a look at the existing pedestrian and bicycle network to understand if there are particular gaps that need to be filled in that and where we might need to focus the efforts there. And in looking at this is a little bit small on the slide. There's probably a little bigger one in your plan, but one of the key parts of that is where are there adequate shoulder widths for particular bicycle use. And we can see that there are a lot of state highways that have adequate shoulder width, but of course those are not ideal for bicycle or pedestrian use, given the higher speeds of travel and the higher traffic volumes on those state highways. So in looking at county highways, there are some gaps in the network of roadways with available sufficient shoulder width. Another piece of this effort was to look at the Rapid City Bike and Pedestrian Plan, which recently was completed, and we wanted to be sure to be consistent with the recommendations coming out of that. So all of this coalesced into a future transportation plan consisting basically of 3 elements: a series of roadway and intersection projects, a bicycle and pedestrian plan, and transit assistance, which I'll get to in detail a little bit later when we talk about comments. But the roadway and intersection projects are highlighted in the draft report and on this graphic here and numbered. Those projects in blue are road facilities, so road projects ranging from repaving to reconstruction. You can see that Sheridan Lake Road is on that list. That's a project that's been in the planning stages and anticipated to be done, I believe, within the next few years. That's a project of reconstruction that's going to add wider shoulders to what's there now. So there are a lot of projects that are similar to that in this list. The red intersection projects are related to those needs that I mentioned earlier. Some of the site distance corrections, a few locations where signalization of an intersection should be considered based on traffic demand. And then there's one here that's highlighted as an independent bicycle pedestrian facility project, and that's out by Wall. One of the things we heard from individuals in the eastern part of the county was that it's pretty difficult to get between Wall and Quinn on a bicycle, and there's a real interest in being able to do that. Now, Wall currently has a little loop trail kind of on the southeast corner of town, so this would be an extension of that trail to get over to Highway 14, where there's a little bit more adequate shoulder to make your way to Quinn. We took those projects and prioritized them based on need and lumped them into 3 main categories: short-term, midterm, and long-term. Short-term is really the next 3 or 4 years. Midterm is from about 2015 to 2025, and then beyond 2025 are those long-term projects. So this is a tool to help the county budget and plan over time to build these things. It's not as if all of this needs to happen at one time, but over time this can be done. So a lot of the projects in the road facility category are already in the county's plan. And I should mention that the county has an ongoing transportation planning process. There is currently a list of projects. And so we've reflected those projects on this list. And we've added a few here and there where the need demonstrated that a project should be included. A couple of those that were added were a paving of Reno Gulch, and another is Sage Creek. We heard a lot of input, and we look at the traffic volumes, and there's a need growing into the future to pave Sage Creek. Now, that's a big project. It's going to require a lot of environmental study and those types of things to support to move that one forward. So that's a pretty costly one, but something that the need supports. Then the intersection projects are a little bit lower cost, and those are in the short bid and long categories as well. We've put those projects that are a little bit less costly but have a measurable benefit into that short-term category, so the county can consider doing those things soon in order to address the concerns at those intersections. Then the Wall Trail extension is also shown here, and these are all given a cost estimate. These are very preliminary numbers, but it gives you a feel for what type of budgeting needs to occur to build these things. Speaking of the budgeting, just in looking at the county's current TIP, the Transportation Improvement Plan, there's about $30 million in projects identified to occur over the next 4 years. And the recommendations coming out of CHAPS in the short term are reflective of that. You see about 26 million in that category. And then in the midterm, about another 24 million. And the long term has that Sage Creek project in it that really contributes quite a bit to that, along with a few other projects to get up to about 69 million. So the total program identified in terms of capital projects for the county to be implementing over the next 20 to 25 years is about $118 million. Just annually, taking a look at that, we see that it's a minimum of about $5 million per year in capital funding, which is really pretty consistent with what is identified in the county's current TIP. And there's obviously quite a number of sources that can help with that funding. There's state money that comes into the mix as well. Actually, I should say more federal that's administered through the state. So that's a target, and probably additional projects that get built over time too. So hence the $5 million is a minimum. Well, we mentioned the importance of the pedestrian and bicycle network, and we wanted to give that its due place in the plan. So what we decided to do is that there aren't any specific, other than the Wall Trail, any specific bicycle and pedestrian improvements. But at the time of road reconstruction for a number of facilities shown in brown dots on this map, at the time of reconstruction, those roads should be built with 4-foot minimum shoulders. So those are routes that really showed a lot of importance to the bicycle network in particular, and that the county should prioritize those efforts when reconstruction is needed on those highways. And I should mention that at least for arterials, the 4-foot minimum shoulder is a part of the county's standard typical section for those roads. So it's really consistent with what the county plans for now. Just to mention a few, you can see Sheridan Lake Road again. The project plan there will provide those 4-foot minimum shoulders. And Spring Creek Road, Neck Yoke, kind of a loop that helps get you on a bicycle around the area to the south and west of Rapid City. Part of the plan was to include roadway standards as well. The county currently has a pretty robust set of roadway standards, so our work started with that, and there were a number of locations in those standards where we really didn't need to do anything in addition to what's currently being done. Road classification is an important one, typical sections, development impacts, access management, and a number of other categories. In the road classification arena, the county's comprehensive plan, done a few years ago, has a functional, shouldn't call it functional, road. It's a road classification plan that we built on. We really were quite consistent with that in what you see here. And that is a plan that lays out roads that play the role of arterials, roads that are collectors, and those are locals. So this is a really important tool to the county to understand how different roads need to be built and what section should be provided along those roads. So you can see in blue the major arterials. You see Sheridan Lake Road again is a major arterial. Out to the east, we have Sage Creek Road, Bigfoot Road, a number of those out toward Wall and Quinn. And in red, those are minor arterials, so Rochford Road, Mystic Road, Deerfield, those also play an important role in conveying larger volumes of traffic over longer distances. I mentioned the typical sections. We worked with the county to identify the appropriate width of lanes and shoulders and roadside features along these roads of different types, so this will guide county efforts in future reconstruction projects, collectors as well. And the roadway management system, wanted to spend just a little bit of time talking about that. One of the challenges that the county faces, and any county really faces, is how to maintain its roadways on an ongoing basis. Different needs pop up all over the county over time, and some counties find themselves in a position of just responding on an as-needed basis. Pennington County's been really proactive in practices of roadway management. Honey's done a good job of compiling a lot of information and assessing the different needs each year for budgeting purposes. So what we were seeking to do was to build on that and provide a tool that's going to help to automate a lot of what is now a kind of a tedious and cumbersome process of testing different budgeting options and coming up with recommendations for consideration on the part of the decision makers. It's kind of a labor-intensive effort too. So when it comes to identifying the appropriate maintenance treatment and the appropriate time at which things need to be done, RMS is a comprehensive software tool for identifying roadway surfacing projects. So the software interface connects with the current county database, pulls in all the information about project histories on road segments, information about the surfacing and the width of all those road segments on the highway system, and spits out, the output is a series of different options for projects that need to be done in a given time frame. So it allows county staff flexibility in testing various budgeting scenarios. And it's a customized software tool with no annual fee. This was a special request of the county. There are a lot of canned software tools that are used out there by different entities. And so what the county wanted was to have a tool that really meshes well with what's done now and doesn't also charge that annual fee. So that's not to say there won't be any ongoing maintenance, of course, with these things. There's always a need to make sure it's reflecting current information, but there's not that annual fee. So this draft report that you've seen has also been submitted to the study advisory team, and they've had the chance to make comments on it. So I wanted to highlight a few of the comments that we've received and how we're planning to address those comments in finalizing the plan. There are a number of various editorial and typographic corrections, so we'll be making those to the plan. Maybe you noticed a few as you went through it, so would certainly appreciate your input on that. And then there were a few more substantive comments that I wanted to spend a little bit more time on today, so that we have a clear idea of how we're addressing it and whether that's going to be an acceptable approach. Those comments came primarily from the Federal Highway Administration folks in Pierre, around the issues of budgeting, livability, and transit funding. And the DOT made a comment about intersection analyses. Regarding the budget, FHWA made a comment seeking a little more information regarding the county's budgeted amounts relative to recommended capital projects. So in response to that, we did a little bit of what I described earlier about the $5 million a year minimum, but we reviewed what the current county plan looks like in the way of expenditures at that $30 million over the next 4 years. And then we identified over time how much the county will need to identify in funding for capital projects, and that was that $5 million minimum. So that's how we plan to respond to that comment. Livability. The Federal Highway Administration, as you probably know, is currently leading something called the Livability Initiative. So it's taking transportation and adding the community piece to it, and understanding the impacts of transportation projects on quality of life. So our plan, I believe, really does address a lot of livability questions. It helps to highlight the importance of how transportation interacts with people's daily lives. But we'll just need to add a little language that highlights that a little bit more clearly. So with the non-motorized accommodation, that's certainly an aspect of livability. The public health of walking and riding your bikes more. Traffic safety is another piece of livability. Obviously, the more you can enhance safety, the more livable an area is. And then transit as well. An important aspect, particularly of transit services in Pennington County, is serving those who are dependent on transit for making trips, medical trips, or trips to visit relatives, those kinds of things. That helps people stay in the places that they live now, as opposed to having to move to a larger city with more medical services. So transit is an important piece of the livability. And right, going into transit, that's another comment we received from FHWA. There was a recommendation made in our draft that was fairly nebulous and needs a little more definition. The recommendation was to allocate some county money toward transit each year. So the plan didn't specify, the draft didn't specify an amount, so FHWA asked that we do a little work and identify what an appropriate amount would be. So we consulted a little bit more with River Cities Transit, and you're probably pretty familiar with what they do. But they provide services primarily in East Pennington County on an on-call basis for individuals needing rides. And there used to be, according to River Cities, and there used to be a contribution made by the county to those services. I'm not sure exactly which budget authority that came out of, but it was about a $3,000 contribution, which also brings with it an additional match with federal money. So the more local money comes to the table, the more federal money those agencies can receive. So we're recommending a contribution of $3,000 each year to support services provided to county residents with transit. There's a growing demand for it. I mentioned the livability benefits, and there have been some recent analyses specific to South Dakota that indicate that the benefits of transit exceed the costs. So there's really a bang for your buck related to investing a little bit in transit. Well, the last comment to highlight came from the DOT. Our analysis of several intersections was focused on the peak hour of traffic, and they wanted us to look a little bit more at additional hours of traffic. So, for example, at Sturgis and Merritt, we need to take a look at hours outside of that peak to see if that really supports the need for signalization. So we're doing that now. We don't get the sense that's going to change much about our recommendations. So there'll be just some minor modifications coming out of that. Next steps, we're going to finalize the report for official county adoption. That'll probably happen in the next couple months. Today, eager to hear your feedback and get comments from you so that I can reflect those comments in the final report. We'll be handing off the roadway management system here in the next couple weeks as the contract expires. So we're working with Heine to provide him with everything that he needs for the RMS, and looking forward to being done at the end of this month. So we'd be happy to take any questions and discussion at this point.
Maybe you have one. I've heard that Meade County is working on a bike plan coming in on the north west corner of the Rapid City area. Was that part
The Deadwood.
connection? Yeah, up in the Deadwood Avenue area.
Okay.
Where your map showed that, sorry, I don't know what's wrong with my throat, but where your map showed the bike path coming in through that area, was that taken into consideration where they're talking about doing their bike plan, you know? had mentioned.
I don't recall that being part of the MPO
Yeah.
deal.
It wasn't, but they are looking at that because they're redoing some roads up in that area. And I'm just curious if that was even, if you even knew. Yeah.
I did not
I've
know.
just heard some
Yeah.
comments that they were talking about that. Oh, Heine, maybe you know more about that.
Yeah, Meade County's going to improve their portion of Deadwood Avenue. I was gonna tie on to their project, but they're using federal money and it wasn't gonna work. And there's only about a half mile of county road, and then we hit the city of Rapid City. So
Right.
I've talked to the landowner once, but I'm trying to get a temporary easement. And then the county's gonna use our local money to add shoulders to our road. And I think that's what Meade County's project is 4-foot wide shoulders, so
Got
it
it.
could be used as a bike path, but it still would only go a half mile into Pennington County, because I don't think the city of Rapid City has any plans to do their portion
Yeah.
from that point, so it still would be a bottleneck.
Okay, that's what I was trying to figure out because I'd heard something and I didn't know if that, because you didn't mention that when you were talking.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Well, I'm absolutely positive that the South Dakota Department of Transportation is gonna go to the legislature and make them start licensing bicycles. One, to supply funds for things like this, rather than coming from the gas tax and from the license plate holders. And also, for identification purposes. And I know coming in 44, you see people, bicycles pull out in front of you, ride down the middle of the road, doing all kinds of things. You don't have a clue who they are. And I came through Deadwood a while back, and I came from Spurfish through Deadwood and then started out to come down south through 385, and had a guy that ran through every stop sign from one end of town to the other on a bicycle, and he was even riding up and on a sidewalk so he could cross the intersections while traffic was going the other way. Didn't have a clue who he was. So,
I was going to mention in response to your Deadwood comment, that could perhaps be a project that we add to the list,
Okay.
if appropriate.
Yeah.
That short county portion in order to tie in.
Yeah, we could, yeah.
I just had heard some comments from them up there and I just said I'd mention it.
Because that's what we're looking for is comments from the commissioners now, because through the grant program that we got for this project, the state would like to have us adopt the plan, and we can either adopt it as presented or adopt it with changes, or if you think a road should be added. I guess that's what we need right now from the county board. And then we'll come back and see if you want to adopt the plan, and that's kind of gonna be our plan to work with in the future. So. I don't know, do we have time for the commissioners to send in written comments if they want, or how much time?
Time is short,
I know
yeah.
time is short, so.
Yeah, I
But
suppose,
We-
next few days.
We'll look at adding that little piece of Deadwood Avenue into the plan, and if there's anything else.
There also was some talk of extending the bike path down east through to Badlands National Park and so on, and I was trying to determine if you really addressed that. I mean, I'm not particularly for that, but there's been some discussion at the MPO meetings and so on.
Yes, yeah, I'm aware of that, and we did reflect it on our map as an improvement to be done by others.
Maybe I'm not.
So it's not something that the county is signing up for at this point. It's more something that's in the mix for future planning, that FYI, kind of an
Okay.
inclusion.
okay, further questions?
It's a lot of work.
Thank you, Lyle, appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
KJ, looks like you're next.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'm KJ Peterson, Chief Deputy Auditor. In your packet today is the provisional 2013 budget. This is with the changes that were reflected, few as they were, with the completion of the budget hearings last week. The provision, and just for the board's information, as we present this today, the provisional budget needs to be approved by the end of July. There's 2 meetings right now scheduled in July, the 3rd and the 17th. I will be here on the 3rd, and Julie and I would both be here on the 17th. Julie would present it if it's whatever the board wishes. The provisional budget totaled $81,979,329. $39,615,158 of that.
39 million?
Excuse me?
You said 39,000. That's
Oh,
39 million?
$39,615,158 dollars of that is miscellaneous revenues. $9,175,512 is coming from cash reserves, and that leaves a total of $36,095,338 that will come from property tax levy. On the $9 million that and 175,512, 3.9 of that of the reserves is for the highway fund. There's a number of projects, and so if you take that 3.9 out from the 9.175, we're actually using less in reserves than we were for this year. The taxes are using the growth and last year's CPI of 2.1, which the board didn't use and had the ability to recoup for 3 years. It does not use the 3% CPI for this year. And so once again, the board would have the opportunity to use that for the next 3 years if they so desired. The tax dollars being levied for next year rose $2,088,640, or about 6.14%. The decrease in overall property tax values in Pennington County, the levy will actually increase because I lost my place here. I read this 3 or 4 times this morning because Julie primarily put this together. The overall property values in Pennington County decreased, which is why the levy will actually go up. Estimated levies are shown at the top of the means of finance, which includes the county consolidated levy, that's the general fund, accumulated building and fare. It will increase to 5.194 from 4.843 last year. That's about 7.25% increase. At this point, we do not have final values from the state. Those normally come in late August, early September. A couple of specifics on county funds. County fire, I believe Denny's here. There has been consideration of utilizing some of their available cash. Denny and Julie are recommending to freeze the levy at last year's levy, which will draw $20,350 from the reserves, leaving approximately $8,500 on the table. The board may change the mill levy freeze if they don't want the cash reserves to continue to grow for some future special project. Also for consideration, special consideration for the board is the library fund. The current budget levels are quickly reducing the reserve that is in that fund, and the board will be faced with a decision in the near future on how to deal with that. There's a couple of options: cut the budget or do another opt-out for additional taxes. Right now, the opt-out is at $188,200, and that is no longer sufficient. You could use that 3% CPI for just this fund if you wanted to do that to generate additional tax dollars. That would get you about $7,200. And if the board did want to initiate an opt-out, that would have to be a decision that is made by the 15th of July. Overall, with this provisional budget, taxes on a $100,000 house will increase approximately $35.10 for the county consolidated levy, 49 cents for the library, and $4 for unorganized road. The budget that is presented, as I said, had a few changes through the course of the hearings. Those are highlighted in pink, and I'm not sure if the board has any specific questions on that. Very few changes from the initial presentation of the budget on revenues, but mostly grant-related. Last of all, as you look at the analysis of the general fund, there are two things that netted out again, just on the general fund to 19.86 estimated reserves. The first was the change in the budgets and revenues that came from those hearings, and the second was that formula calculating error that I believe came up from Commissioner Holloway. Julie does apologize for that and is only offering up a senior moment as the reasonings why. Those formulas, sometimes when you work with those formulas, you go back to the old way and you think, I can do this better in my head, but really they help us tremendously, but there's still always that margin for error. The board for some time has had the goal of 20% reserves. And so with that close figure of 19.86, if you wanted to get right to that 20%, we would have to make an adjustment of $61,900, either increasing revenues or decreasing tax portions of budgets. Julie made conservative estimates for both the unexpended and overcollected revenues. She wants to recognize the hard work of the department heads in bringing their estimated revenues in. One thing that Pennington County has always done is tie the miscellaneous revenues to the budget expenditures. So if the revenues aren't collected, then that portion of the budget isn't spent. Julie is recommending the board accept this provisional budget as presented for the budget year 2013, totaling $81,979,329, supported with miscellaneous revenues of $39,615,158, reserves of $9,175,512, and tax revenues of $36,095,338, utilizing last year's 2.1 CPI and reserving this year's CPI for all other funds, with perhaps some consideration of the board on the library. And again, then, this will take us to the next step of the final budget in September, which has a deadline of September 30th to be approved. Don't know if the board has any particular questions about budgets or line items. I know we have lots of department heads here as well, and I'll be glad to do my best.
Any questions of KJ?
Mr. Chair, KJ, I am really concerned about the library budget, and for me, I'd like to see a projection. We've gotten it in the past, a projection of the funding out for however long it'll last. But this time, I'd like to see the comparison, if we would go ahead with a 3% CPI for this year, how much farther out that'll get us on that opt-out. When we didn't take CPI last year, it did cut back by about 2 years the amount of time we had on that opt-out. And so I think that it would behoove us to at least look at that part and compare that.
Okay?
I don't know that we'll do that, certainly, but I'd like to see that. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, KJ? Okay. I talked to Lindell a little bit yesterday about this, and since he couldn't be here today, he's getting to be an expert witness when it comes to ag questions in front of our Western South Dakota law enforcement and judges. And I could only be going to have to quit getting himself in trouble, so he wound up in court every other week. But they're using him as a legal advisor for lots of different ag questions that's going on around the western part of the state. But he did say that he had no problem continuing this until the first meeting in July, so he could be here. And I think it'd save a lot of time and things today if we went that route.
I'm fine with that. I just don't want us to go too long.
Well, we've got the last meeting in July, and that's not a big deal, and then we can make changes in September also. But as far as the library deal goes, I guess I was in this library thing from the very start, and they didn't like it then, and they still don't like it now. And when we had to opt out of a tax freeze in order to pay the library, to buy library cards for people that basically weren't paying taxes, was kind of a thorn in my bush there, and I had a little problem with it. I'm not too sure it's not time for the people to tell us whether they really want this again or not. So that might be something we might want to think about also.
I think that's part of our discussion. I do.
Yep. And I'm not sure, Jay, maybe you can answer that for me. Can the county commissioners refer this to another vote of the people, or does it have to come from a petition?
The best way to do it is to opt out for another couple $100,000, and you'll find out real fast.
Because then that could be referred. Mm-hmm.
That's where the two.
Yep. Okay, further questions? I'd make a motion that we postpone this final decision until, I shouldn't say final decision, but postpone this decision until the first meeting in July.
I'll second that.
Motion and a second. Is there discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. I think, well, KJ, since you're there, go ahead with the
Yep. Next, we have
item 14.
a couple of budget supplements. We have a Title III Mountain Pine Beetle budget supplement in the amount of $143,441.90 is coming from the restricted fund balance. 112,000 of that is pre-2008 funds, and $31,441.90 is the after 2008. In that fund, we have to keep track of how we spend that old and new money, as we have referred to it. Scott Guffey is here to answer any questions about the supplement. And I was not here at the last meeting, although I did put this information together on the available funds and where we were at with that. Don't know if the board has any questions regarding that.
Discuss. Questions, KJ?
Mr. Chair, I'd move to approve the supplement of the 2012 Title III Mountain Pine Beetle budget in the amount of $143,441.90 from a restricted fund balance. $112,000 is pre-2008 and $31,441.90 as 2008 after funding.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion. From the public? All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Next, we have a budget supplement for the 24/7 fund operating budget, requesting $57,500 from the restricted fund balance. There is a letter from Brian Mueller outlining the building plan at the old DSG building, and I'm sure he's available here to answer the questions for that. Both of these have been posted notices as well.
I don't remember, in the last meeting, did we actually have a public hearing on this? It says here to approve the supplement today. Did we actually have that on the agenda as a?
The meeting, the motion from 2 weeks ago was to schedule the hearing for the supplement. I think that there was reference to some public meetings that were held by Sheriff Tom regarding what was going to be happening in the building.
In the area, yeah.
Okay.
I'd make a motion to approve the supplement to the 24/7 operating budget in the amount of $57,500 from restricted fund balance.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. There's a discussion from the public? Commission? All in favor of that motion on the floor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next item, KJ, is a malt beverage license.
Retail malt beverage on-off sale licenses for both new and renewals for Bear Country USA, retail on-off sale malt beverage renewal. For Crooked Creek Resort, a retail on-off sale malt beverage new. They previously had one that included wine, and this one does not. Mystery Mountain Resort, retail on-off sale malt beverage, and South Dakota Farm Wines renewal. And lastly, Tatanka Trading Post for retail on-off sale malt beverage, this one being a new one.
I have a question or two. Is Jay still here? Did he get away?
Who are you looking for? Jay?
Jay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
you know, on this first, what we were just talking about, Black Hill Speedway is referred to on there, and yeah, we have later on in the agenda, we have so many things relating to it.
I'm looking at,
It says the liquor license applications.
I'm looking at this one, it has the four,
Oh,
it
okay.
doesn't have,
Sorry, this
we
was
do,
on
we do
top.
have these two separate
Okay, 'cause
for
it's
J.
just way
The ones that I just read through don't have anything to do on either side with the
Okay, this was
speedway.
on top.
But don't go
Okay.
far, there'll be some.
Yeah. Definitely.
And Vicky's here too to help us with those.
I'd make a motion to approve the our malt beverage licenses as presented.
Second.
Motion and a second. Is there discussion from the public? Commission? All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Okay, in reference to the next two items, 14D and 14E, we included an additional short memo. The Black Hills Speedway application from Lieben Promotions was advertised on June 6th for renewal of his license. And also Half Mile Inc., Black Hills Speedway was advertised on June 6, 2012 for a new license and a renewal of one. And the board will need to make a motion to postpone indefinitely, so the county will not have to advertise again if they choose not to take action on the renewal or the new license. I know that there is some pending litigation on this second. I'm going to turn this over to Jay. Perhaps it can be addressed at the meeting on the 3rd.
Thank you, KJ. As the board's aware, it's been in the paper quite a bit. There's a lawsuit between Kirchhoff and Liebig in this matter, and I guess on July 2nd, the circuit court's going to rule apparently as to the legal relationship between the parties, which there's a third party, Mr. Keister, who I think is present today, who is wondering or is waiting for the outcome of that as well to determine what that relationship is between those parties. So I'm going to attend that hearing if I can do it. It's on July 2nd. So the idea would be to have these licenses back up on July 3rd, if I remember right. So hopefully we would be able to report to the commission at that time. If the judge rules in such a manner that it's clearly understood who's in and who's out, then it would make logical sense at that time. You have the two licenses before you and you can approve or disapprove accordingly. So I don't have anything else really to tell you on that other than we're all kind of anxiously awaiting to see what the court rules if they do. Of course, can't guarantee that we'll get a ruling on that day. Also, down the road, we don't know who might appeal, depending on who feels aggrieved by whatever ruling might be handed down that day. So those are kind of uncertainties at this point, but I'll be able to report more to you on the 3rd, hopefully. And one other matter, I guess, we did have, Holly, I think, had contact with the Department of Revenue. They also suggested that this matter be continued until at least July 3rd. They understand the situation that's going on and thought that would be a reasonable way to handle it as well, so.
What, can I ask?
Sure.
Jay? I'm sorry. So the recommendation from the auditor was to make the motion to postpone indefinitely so we didn't have to advertise again? So really that would be the preferred motion over postponing it to July 3rd?
Either one's fine.
Okay.
The 3rd, we just have to, if you're gonna postpone it again, you just have to make that motion.
Right.
Okay.
Otherwise, I would have to re-advertise, and then I
Okay.
have to charge them money again
Oh, sure.
for the
Okay.
advertising.
And Jay, if one side appeals this, that doesn't, I mean, we could still issue the license to whatever the judge makes the ruling on it.
I think that would be my recommendation at that point because that could carry out, you appeal to Supreme Court and maybe it's 6, 8, 9, 10, 12 months from now before we get a decision and that could flip things around and I think it'd be reasonable to go ahead and approve or disapprove based on the ruling from the circuit court. But hopefully I'll have more information for you on the 3rd.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Keister, and I just want to make sure that July 3rd, I come in to the committee. Are you going to have a meeting on the 3rd to decide? Okay, so I can get put on the agenda there. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
I'd make a motion to continue this item till July 3rd.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion from the public? The commission?
For both licenses,
All of them.
Right.
both license applications.
Yep. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. How about a 10-minute break here?
Thank you.
That's fine with me.
Do we have a motion for a 10-minute break?
Move.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion? All in favor of that motion, say aye. Aye. Ready to get started again? Mike and Mike.
Good morning, Mike Cool with Billings Grounds. The county's expansion project over on Block 99 includes geothermal wells underneath the parking lots over on that site. These will be used to heat and cool the new buildings. In order to be confident that we have these wells are properly installed and have that necessary capacities to run those systems involved, we need to get a geothermal testing and observation consultant on board. Skyline Engineering prepared a specification for the system testing and issued an RFP on our behalf. And they received two proposals. The low proposal was $43,288. That was from Hydrolux Testing and Consulting. This was an expected expense, and we did budget it for it. Our budgeted number was about $53,000, so we're about $10,000 under what our budget number was for the work. And we have, what you have on with your memo is the original proposal that we had received. We asked for some corrections on that and a agreement, signable agreement. I got one last night for it. Having a discussion with Jay Alderman, there's a couple of things that we'd like to alter in regard to the terms and conditions yet for that contract, but I am seeking the commission's approval of an award of the contract and to authorize the chair's signature once we have that contract revised in their hands.
The dollar amount, the adjustments you're making are not affecting the bottom line any?
No, there will not be any difference in the scope of the work or the cost of the, it's just in terms of some of our typical language we like to have involved with a contract in regard to insurance requirements, payment, things of that nature.
Okay. I'd make a motion to authorize the chairperson's signature to the agreement based upon Hydrolux proposal in the amount of, what was it, 43,000?
Yes, 43,000.
11.
It's $45,885.
Or is it 45,000? Sales, there shouldn't be any sales tax on it.
Right, correct.
43,288.11. That'd be my motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, and what are these major changes? Is there gonna be any alterations in the bidding, or?
No, it just has to do with, we normally, like, waiver of subrogation on the insurance. So there's some things that we don't normally like to have in an agreement that we like to see struck from the agreement that we received last night.
Plus, don't you always have to, I mean, we always delineate out in those contracts how we pay and when they should
Correct.
submit, and that,
In regard to, so we have them submitting their pay app so that we can get in our regular voucher cycle.
there wasn't anything in the original bid forms or the bidding on the building that carried it?
The RFP that was issued just stated that it will be mutually agreeable terms and conditions to the proposal. We did not issue the proposal ourselves, so Skyline did it on our behalf. There's only a couple of companies that can do this work, so.
I think that's why we didn't bid this.
We did bid it.
Yeah, we went out and asked for proposals as we would typically do for professional services work.
But that's not a bid.
No,
I know, so it's professional services that doesn't need to be
Correct.
bid.
Right. And I don't know if you had a chance to visit about it while I was in the hallway, but the two items that, I read through it, the two items that I talked to Mike about, and I think he's gonna contact our insurance carrier, is there's a waiver of subrogation sentence in there, and there's a professional liability cap of 500,000. I just think those are a couple items that Mike or Perry with our insurance carrier ought to have some involvement in, because that affects them directly. So if they say we're fine with this language, then I'm fine with it. If they suggest it ought to be increased or changed in some manner with regard to the insurance, then I think we should take their lead and do that. But that's the only thing that I had any comments on.
Does this absolutely have to be done today? Can't we negotiate the proper contract that we need and then?
I don't know what the schedule is right now for the drilling, but we do need to have somebody on site observing as soon as they do start drilling. You remember when it was?
It's gonna be real touch and go as far as waiting for the next commission meeting.
It'll be awful close at that point in time, but.
I'm gonna vote for this, but I don't like to vote for contracts that we don't really know what they are. But I guess I'll take your word that it's not any big changes, Jay.
Well, it'd be just those two from my perspective. So.
Further questions of Mike or Jay, either one? From the public? All in favor of the motion on the floor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item, items from highway. Heine?
Good morning.
By the way, thank you for the email on Deerfield Road,
Okay,
the Hill City to Deerfield, and the mud hole.
the mud hole. I just, talking to Federal Highway yesterday and this morning, and just to let you know that he's got 137 days of penalty at the full $2,200 a day, and then 84 days at 10% of that when he was shut down through the winter. The project was supposed to have been done November 1st of 2011. So right now, he owes $319,880 in penalty.
Who gets the penalty when he pays them? Does that go to the state or does it go to the county?
Federal Highway.
You were hoping.
Federal Highway gets to keep that money. It was a $2,219,000 contract, so.
And were you, I know this is not on the agenda, but were you right that a foreign company has purchased this company?
One of the subcontractors, that Synergy Contracting out of Wyoming, subcontracted out to a local contractor, and that local contractor I heard was bought by a French company, so. And the subcontractor's the one doing the asphalt paving in the base, so.
It's interesting. Do we get paid in euros or in dollars? Okay,
The item I have on the agenda is fencing. I had a call from Jensen Rance. over in the Wast area. He said he installed a new fence and he felt it would be in the county's best interest to come over and put reflectors on the railroad ties because they appeared to be kind of a safety issue. They were close to the roadway, and went and looked at it and said, hey, you can't put a fence in the right of way. You can't fence the right of way. So then he said, well, if I can't fence the right of way, I'd like to have the county install guardrail in this area plus 2 other areas on Jensen Road where it goes through the breaks coming up off of I-90. He wants to fence all of his property because he's having a lot of trespass issues. I told him the fence wasn't acceptable the way it was put in, and then he requested guardrail, so I thought, well, this is gonna be a item that the commissioners will have to decide. This road was built by his grandpa years ago. In 1953, the county added it to the county highway system. And then there was a period of time that it went under township control. And then there was an agreement between the township and the county to put it back on the system. So if we look at South Dakota Codified Law 31-3-1, if the county can prove they've spent money on a traveled way for 20 plus years, we automatically get a 66-foot wide prescriptive right of way for that. So the other thing is fencing, and Attorney General Marty Jackie had a news release back in early 2012, and he tried to get a bill introduced, or he introduced a bill in the legislature to allow commissioners or townships to allow private parties to put a fence the right of way on a temporary basis. Basically, he stated in that news release that state law does not currently authorize a county to allow landowners to fence off a portion of a right of way, even for the practical and reasonable purpose of avoiding water, snow, or other natural concerns. Just for your information, if we put a 3-cable guardrail up, and that's what he was saying, if you put a guardrail up, I can tie my fence to your guardrail, and a 3-cable guardrail cost about $12.50 a foot, plus anchors. Each anchor's $500. So if we did a 3-cable guardrail for 400 foot, it would cost us $5,000 plus $1,000, so it'd be $6,000 to put that up. If we put the W beam up guardrail, that would be around $15,000. And our current bid price for fencing is like 78 cents a foot, so fencing's only $320. But there's more than just this spot, so I guess the question is, it's my understanding he's not allowed to fence the right of way, and I think the fence, either he fences the stock dam out or does something different, or the board could let us put a guardrail up there. The problem I have is we can't mow the shoulders, and we can't plow snow, and there's a lot of issues, and the way those, my understanding is those railroad ties are like 8 foot, so 4 foot's buried in the ground, so it's an obstruction in the right of way, and if somebody hits it, it would do a lot of damage to a vehicle. So I guess I need advice from the board on how you want to handle this issue about fencing the right of way.
He fenced the right of way without any consulting you about what he was doing until after it was done?
Right.
Is that correct?
Called me on the phone and said, you gotta put reflectors up. He said, this doesn't look too good. Which I agree.
We're missing the point here, aren't we? Yep. The question is not whether you can fence the right of way. It's whether you can put fence inside the right of way.
Correct.
Because he can put fence along the right of way on his property.
Yes.
All he wants to. What do you usually do in this situation? What would you?
Well,
you go out and take it out, right?
this has been kind of a touch and go issue because I brought this in front of the board a few years ago and I got reprimanded for writing a letter telling people to take the fence out of the right of way, so it's kind of touchy for me. I know they're not supposed to fence the right of way. But enforcing it is a question. Do we spend the money to put guardrail up through this area? It's a man-made dam and it's kind of it's narrow. There's a culvert that goes through the road. It's a 48-inch culvert. About 6-7 years ago when the water was down, we wanted to extend that culvert and then add some fill along the shoulder so it wasn't up close to the road. And at that time, we've been in kind of a feud on whether we've had right of way or not. And our opinion is we do have the 66 foot and we have opposition from the landowner because he said his grandpa built the road, never did deed it over or grant the county an easement, so.
Heine, is, if, with our 66-foot right-of-way that we have there, is there room for him to put a fence on the edge of that right-of-way? Or
No.
does that put him down in the water then?
Puts him in the water. About 3 years ago, the water was slapping over the road. When we had a strong wind, we actually have wave action where water came up on the road. So when that dam fills up, and the pipe under the road's kind of an equalizer to keep the water the same level on both sides. So, yeah, if he tried to fence on the right of way, it'd be in the water.
You've also indicated on this, and I assume you're the one who did this, provided this little
Yes.
map. It's got a little, it's got some red markings on it, says fence in right-of-way. Does he have a fence then that goes along that road on both sides coming
No,
up to the dam?
It's never been fenced before. That's all been treated kind of like open range. There's a cattle guard about quarter mile north of this.
So what's the purpose of the fence then if it's?
He's having too much trespass issues and he's gonna fence all of his property to keep hunters and everybody else off his property. He says he has to get cows from the south side of this dam from one pasture to the north side.
But his intention is to fence all the way along Jensen Road?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I mean, I guess the law is the law. We got a 66-foot right of way and he doesn't, he's not supposed to put fence in our right of way, then he should take it down. I would agree with you.
I guess we could, I'll just throw something out and we can get this discussion started, but I'd make a motion to tell Mr. Jensen to remove his fence from the right-of-way, and that if he doesn't, that we do it for him if that's legal by means of the state's attorney's advice, and also that we do not put any money in the guardrail. That's my motion. Do we have a second on it by chance?
I'll second it for discussion purposes.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Heine and I have discussed this, and I agree with him entirely. That law's real clear. I mean, this is, it's as if it was legally dedicated and located. That's what the statute provides. And so this is definitely under county jurisdiction, that full 66 foot. I just have a question for Heine. We didn't get to talk about in the photographs where the fence is to the right of the fence and the way we're looking at it in the picture. There's trees, brush, debris. Can any of that be cut, mowed down to move that fence further off the right of way so it isn't so close to the edge but still is not in the water and still provides the purpose that it's set out to do?
We've wanted to do that, but we always get into the fight that we don't have right of way.
But I guess this is, if we're gonna hang our hat on the fact that we got the right of way to have the fence taken down, then we got the right of way to put dirt in there if we want to.
And cut the trees and the brush.
Cut the trees and do whatever else you normally do in that 66-foot right of way.
It sounds
You
like,
got it or you don't, one of the two.
yeah, something along those lines seems like it would work and suit everyone's purpose and needs. So that's why I just bring that up.
I don't know if Jay would agree, but I would like to see the letter come out of the state's attorney's office saying that we do have a 66-foot right-of-way, according to this law, and that, you're not allowed to put your fence in it.
I would agree, 'cause I don't think Jay has enough to do, and another court case wouldn't hurt him one
Okay,
bit.
oh.
The only,
Well, and I had a telephone call, and I'm not gonna name names at the present time, but also said that this, if this fence stays there, that the neighbors that come through there with their haying equipment and combines and things like that will not be able to get their equipment down that road, and that's one of the problems with this, the way it sits right now. I don't think we can restrict people from getting from one piece of land to another, and it's wrong that that attempt has been made.
You know, there's both Supreme Court case law and of course, under the authority on the county highway, we control the 66-foot wide right-of-way, and you can't obstruct it. So the authority is there, and it's just, I'm just suggesting by those photographs that there might be a way to accomplish everybody's need. The
Right.
fence gets moved from where it presently is, but it still is in that general location, so everybody's happy. That's all I'm suggesting.
Thing I don't understand, if it's been open range all of this time, why are we fighting about it?
Well, the open range law went away years ago.
Yeah, but still, there's open ranges all over the state of
I
South
know.
Dakota.
But he wants to fence all of his property because of trespass issues and hunters, and, I mean, he owns a lot of acres over there, and people just kind of wander wherever they went, so he made a decision to fence all of his property, so.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, one of the things that I am for this action, but one of the things I was most concerned about, and maybe you can tell me this, Jay or Heine, if there was an accident and someone ran into those railroad ties, because we did not take action, would we be liable?
absolutely.
Okay,
I'd say
so for me, it's definitely a liability issue.
I think once we become aware of a hazard, we have an obligation to do something about it. Obviously, if you're not aware of it, there's not much we could do and be liable for. So now that this presents a hazard in the sense that it's narrow and farm equipment or somebody could run into it, I think we need to do something about it. But it may be that it can be moved, still serve the purpose, and not create that hazard.
Yeah.
So I think that should be looked into.
Okay.
Further discussion.
Well, I guess I'd like to add to your motion, because I'd like to put a time limit on when we're gonna have the owner, give him the opportunity to take that out if he wants to, Mr. Jensen. So I would, and I don't know, Heine, what do you think's a reasonable period of time? 2 weeks? Jay, 2 weeks? Is that acting quick enough?
30 days or 15 days to remove it?
And remember what the last question was, are we liable if somebody hits it?
We
Yeah,
are.
I know.
And we are.
But what's 2 weeks? Okay, I would say 2 weeks. And then the other thing is, I'd like to add to that motion, is that if he doesn't take them down and you have to go take them down, that we assess him the cost of it, of pulling them out.
I have no problem with that, any of that.
So can you just add that to the motion? Thanks.
Further, go ahead, Jay.
Not to beat it to death, but I guess, would you like Heine to call him immediately rather than waiting for a letter?
Absolutely.
And telling him it needs to be moved, but is there direction for Heine to negotiate with Mr. Jensen to maybe pull it up, cut some brush, whatever, move the fence, if it can be done, a little further in, so that it can serve its purpose and not be a hazard? That's all something Heine could do in maybe one phone call or one visit to the site.
I guess I need to tell me, if it's in the right of way, it's a hazard, isn't it?
Well, yes, but I mean, there's so many landowners throughout the county that have fencing in the right of way, and I've never fought the issue if there's a culvert or something and they have to come up in the right of way to get around this obstruction. We've never, and I've seen it on the interstate, the state allows it too, you know, in that case. And I think what Jay's saying, if we go cut some trees, mow the brush, can he get the fence 5, 6 feet off the edge of the road? And I know we're not supposed to allow fencing in the right of way, but it happens on different areas. So-
I would rely on your advice to us. I mean, you're the guy we pay the big bucks to run the highway department.
Okay, I'll work with Jay and we'll draft a letter and he can send it out on their stationery, which have a little more weight than mine and.
But I'd suggest you make a phone call. You'd make a phone call. I'd
Yeah,
suggest you go ahead and call him and let him know that there's a 2-week time frame on this.
Right.
We gotta get this thing out of there.
Yeah.
Otherwise, somebody runs into one of those railroad ties that's buried 3 foot in the ground. It's not gonna move very much.
That's why we put those traffic cones up right away to kind of help warn the public, so.
Okay. Any further discussion?
I thought he'd be here because he said he wanted it on the agenda, so.
You got it.
Thank you, that's all I have.
Thanks. All in favor of the motion on the floor, say aye. 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 Opposed? Motion carried. Oh, items from IT.
Good morning,
Morning.
Russ Tinsvold, IT Director for Pennington County. What you've got before you today is a contract request for Diana Nelson. This is to replace the contract that we have that expires at the end of June. As you are probably aware, this project originally was expected to be done at the end of June, and that's gotten delayed a little bit. Right now, we're hoping at the end of September. That's our current target date. Just so you understand what this contract means in dollars, we don't expect to have a need for Diana's consulting very much between now and the end of the year, but we need to have that opportunity available for us should we need it. We're really starting to wind down on the amount of hours that we're using her. For example, so far in the month of June, it's something less than $2,000. That's significantly less than what it was earlier this year. So we don't expect to have a lot of need for her services. Some of her services outside of this contract, I think, will be with the assessor's office, if maybe that's not the right office, but related to voting.
Where's the money coming from to pay these?
This comes out of the IT's budget.
And this is the contract for Diana Nelson, not Linda, correct?
That's correct. This is just for Diana
I'll
Nelson.
make a motion to approve it.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it, but just to let you know on this, on the IT budget, right? Granted, it's coming out of the IT budget, but probably at the next commission meeting, we'll be coming back to the board with an indication of what our shortages are gonna be in that IT budget because of all this consulting work and cleaning up that we've been doing over there to get this thing resolved. So even though it's coming out of that budget, we're eventually gonna have to make a supplement to the budget.
We've been figuring that all along.
Mr. Chair, if I may?
Yes. Go ahead.
I have made a request to Holly to be on the agenda for the July 3rd meeting to just give you an update on where we're at, what my observations have been in that first 30 days or so, and we can talk about where the budget's at that point.
Okay.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Questions from the public? All in favor of the motion on the floor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Oh, that was ball fire,
It
wasn't
wasn't
it?
on. Big-
Do we need a roll call vote?
I didn't hear any no's, so.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item, item 18 is the request for public fireworks display permit from Black Hill Speedway.
Hello, I'm Bill Keister with Black Hill Speedway. And what I'm proposing is a Class C fireworks display, which we had in 2009 when I ran it. It's only a 2-inch shell, and the National Fire Protection Agency recommends 70 feet per inch of shell. And like I said, this is a Class C. It's intended to be shot by anybody in the public. It's not a 8-inch Class B that is a pyrotechnician type of deal. And I could go buy the fireworks and do it myself, but what Jennifer at All Star Fireworks does for me is she sets them off to music and a computer display. So anyway, we've done this in the past, and I'm just asking to do the same thing that we've done in the past. I know other fireworks displays are, the huge Class B, but I'm more comfortable with the Class C at the facility myself. So she does the Sioux Falls Pheasants baseball team every home game that's on a Friday night in Sioux Falls. She just did last Friday a fireworks display of the same kind for Cancer Walk in Mitchell. So, I mean, this type of fireworks display is something that I'd like you to approve, for the Speedway on the 6th of July.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'm afraid we're gonna have to have Denny up here, because the way it looks to me is the same person, last year had a bunch of problems with shooting fireworks out there.
Good morning, Denny Gorton, Pennington County Fire. In 2009 and 2010, Jennifer from All Star Fireworks in Mitchell did the public display. Last year it was a different gentleman when Shane Liebeck had the racetrack. About a month ago, I got an email or a letter from Jennifer from All Star Fireworks. Says, here's what we're going to shoot for proposal on July 6th at the Speedway. It's exactly the same thing she shot in 2009. The list she gave me included 2-inch and 3-inch items. So I don't know, I'm kind of confused. In 2010, when I went out there, I don't know if you have a copy of my memo, or my letter to Bill and stuff. They were shooting them right down in front of the Speedway. They didn't tell me, or right in front of the grandstands. We agreed they were going to use the north end of the racetrack. They moved it. I wasn't aware of it. As far as I know, they were shooting 3-inch, probably certainly less than, I'm going to say, 50 feet from the grandstands. So I don't know what to do.
Did you get a response? I mean, this email is dated May 18th, 2012. Did you get a response?
She claims she never got it, which I guess is always possible. So I resent it to her, and then also made a copy of all this for Mr. Keister here. So I guess
Even that, when you resent it to her, or you made a copy and sent it to her, did she, no response?
She then called, actually, she called me, said she never got it. I explained to her that at that time, our state's attorney's opinion was you could not have a public display on July 6th. She said, well, that's just the way it's going to be, and I guess I'll be illegal, and hung up the phone, so.
In other words, she doesn't want to work with you real strongly.
Well, they didn't work with me. I guess I'm quite disappointed. I was quite upset 2 years ago when they didn't tell me they were moving it, didn't tell me what they were shooting. She says, I'm going to do exactly the same thing this year. I guess I have questionable confidence in that right now. It's the bottom line.
Really?
I have a question, Denny. You know, fireworks, they have, in order to shoot them, they have to apply to the commission for a permit.
Correct.
Who applies? Anybody, or the lessor, the owner of the property? Is there any language in there like a beer license?
Not that I'm aware of. Probably whoever probably owns the property, because they'd certainly have to give permission. And most of the time, then they've hired a pyrotechnician to come in and actually do the display.
Do we know who owns this property?
That's, I believe, is what's going to be decided maybe on July 2nd, so.
And so, and it looks to me like they're person that they are hiring to contract this fireworks display out has forgotten about what happened a few years ago out there when a young lady about 10 years old was killed by being hit by a shell that didn't fragment, and the powder sack apparently came down, hit her in the chest, and stopped her heart, from what I understand. So it looked to me like if we're being rather unsafe by shooting that close to the public.
That was a Class B. This is a Class C. It's a total different firework. We did it in 2009. We were 140 feet away from the spectators. You just already approved that back in 2009 for us. And I was the leaser of this facility at that time when you approved it the last time I was doing it.
Well, I guess I have a question, Mr. Keister. What is your relationship to the Speedway?
I'm just leasing it.
From who?
From Ed Kirchhoff. He holds title to it in this courthouse at the Register of Deeds.
So, Mr. Keister, did when you heard what our fire coordinator said, and I assume you've seen a copy of his email that he sent to this Jennifer lady.
Yes, I did.
What's your reaction to that? I mean, if she just blowed him off, it makes it pretty hard for us to approve any kind of a permit.
I agree with that. All I'm going on is what she did for me. We had 2-inch shells then. If she faxed or emailed Denny a 3-inch list, that isn't what I, signed on for. I signed on for a 2-inch shell because, like I said, the National Fire Protection Agency, the national agency, that's their recommendations for the whole United States. So that's what we went with in the past. That's what we're going with now. That's the only data I have to give you is what we did in the past.
Well, however, that isn't what was happening in the past.
In what year,
2010.
2009 I wasn't there in 2010.
Okay.
I'm just asking you what you did for me before in the past. You approved it. I'm asking you to approve the same thing that I did before.
Okay, what happens, and this might be for Jay, what happens if we would approve this for Mr. Keister, and then it comes out that it goes the other direction with this lawsuit on the first part of July?
And that's what I wanted to come up generally and speak about just briefly. It's my understanding that of record, Mr. Kirchhoff is the owner of the Speedway. If you went across the hallway here, that's what you would find out. My understanding that the litigation is essentially Mr. Liebig claiming that there is a relationship, maybe akin to like a contract for deed to the property, buying it over time, a certain percent interest. That's all been laid out in the newspapers. I don't think there is an issue with Mr. Keister being allowed to apply for this public permit. I'm not saying anything about the merits. Whether you decide to issue it or not, you have the absolute discretion to not issue it. So I'm not addressing that at all. But as to the question of what's your relationship and who's the owner, of record, it's Kirchhoff. And that's the way it is until there's something decided differently. So at this point, I guess I don't have any angst with you. If you want to issue the permit, I believe you could do so. If you don't want to issue the permit for the reasons that we're kind of generally discussing here, that's absolutely your call as well.
So are we issuing the permit, would we be issuing the permit to Mr. Keister or to this Jennifer lady?
It'd be the individual applying for it. I think she's the one that's actually applying for it, isn't she?
No, I'm applying for it because I'm the one that has the insurance. She does too. But I'm the one that applied for the fireworks display, and I'm just hiring her to shoot them off. Like I said, it's just anybody can go to the fireworks stand and buy these fireworks. It's not a firework that you have to have, a Class B.
My understanding is that Denny has the paperwork. When somebody wants to apply for it, There is paperwork that they typically would fill out, so I would suggest that that get filled out so that it's of record in writing, who's applying for it, who's actually conducting the display, and the exact type of fireworks or class of firework that's being proposed to be shot off. That's all preliminary issues that I think should be done. That still doesn't address whether or not you decide to issue it in the first place.
So, Mr. Chair, Denny, if I remember correctly, isn't there a 30-day, I mean, they apply 30 days before, so you have time to work out the kinks?
Yes, in about 2007, I presented we'll call it a policy for the
Yes.
commissioners. And it basically said that, that there was a 30-day application period. I mean, 30 days prior to the display date, they needed to get a permit from the commissioners. Then 14 days prior to the public display, because a lot of times there's last-minute things that change. So 14 days prior to the public display, they had to provide a diagram of the area for discharge and distances to the public, a certificate of insurance with Pennington County as an additional named insured in the amount of $5 million, name and address of the pyrotechnician, copy of the pyrotechnician's qualifications, and a copy of the invoice that details the size, type of fireworks to be used, and date and anticipated time of public display, and an alternate date if needed. And then that was to be provided 14 days ahead of time so that we could review it, so.
And Mr. Keister, were you aware of those?
I gave Danny the copy of the drawing. My wife dropped it off with Holly so that we could get on the agenda.
Have you
And
filled out the application yet? And were you aware of that 30-day application date?
I was aware of it because that's what we went through the last time in 2008.
So why didn't we follow it this time?
Thank you for your time.
Well, since he doesn't obviously want to stick around to see the final results, I'll make a motion to deny it. And I'll explain why.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Motion and a second.
My reason is mainly, I mean, I don't want to deprive people of fireworks on the 4th of July.
No.
Even whether it's the 6th, that's fine. But when we have an applicant talk, and we have our department head saying, here's what I want you to do, and she said, I'm going to do it however I want to do it, even if it's illegal. Well, sorry, you're not. That's my reason.
Well, and I find it also unfortunate because I do remember when Mr. Liebig, we had a special meeting to approve that license the last time, and he was very aware of his time limits, and he still doesn't have that application into us, right? So how, I mean, that's unfortunate. How can we approve an application that isn't even presented to us? That's very unfortunate that he knew about it, admitted he knew it, and then did not do it. I'm sorry about that.
Well, we got something here that they signed. Keister signed it, and it doesn't look like it's properly filled out. I don't know who he turned it into. Was it to you, Denny?
I'm not sure which.
There's no date.
No date, no.
Anything. There's nothing, it's not completed.
You never saw that?
No, that's the first time I've ever seen it.
I see.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Further discussion? Input from the public? From the commission? All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Yeah, me too. Holly, you have a schedule you want to talk about for a meeting?
I do. We've had a request to look at our schedule for the first meeting of our 2013 year. Seeing as how the first Tuesday is on the 1st, which will be closed due to New Year's, we'd like the board to look at another option.
So our meeting in December, Holly, I didn't look at that. How-
I knew you were gonna ask me that, and I didn't grab December's calendar.
Yeah, it'd be an exception if it's on.
If we go Wednesday, if you wanna go the second and fourth Tuesdays of January. I think, isn't that what Nancy's kinda going towards, is depending on what our last meeting in December is?
Yeah, I'll be the 18th.
What about just having it like on the 3rd or the 4th of that week?
We can certainly do that. The board
If
just
it
needs to
isn't
make a
anybody's.
motion to set it.
And then just go on with what we have been.
Fine with me, I don't care.
Yeah.
That work? Which would be the best one for anybody, 3rd or the 4th?
I don't have a preference.
3rd.
Third?
Okay. We won't mess our party up, huh?
So does that need to be in the form of a
Yes,
motion?
please.
I'd make that motion.
And I'll second it.
Is there discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Commissioner Holloway, you had the next item, I think, an add-on, item 20B.
Right. I think we all received a copy of a letter, and unfortunately it wasn't signed, but it was a little bit disturbing. It's concerning the Jackson Heights high-rise apartments. It's my understanding those are under the Pennington County Housing. And I think we appoint members to that board.
Yes, sir.
I don't know, it doesn't indicate on here that board received a copy of this. And so what I would like to see the county commission forward this to that Pennington County Housing Board. And then I'd like to see them get back to us, or at least somebody from them get back to us to let us know what they find out, if any of this is factual or if it's all just fictitious.
I did fax it over to the staff of Pennington County Housing, but I will take it one step further and go to the actual board.
Right. And I'd like to see us have a letter that goes along with that, asking for some response of what their findings were, if any.
Okay.
And so,
that, I don't know if I need a motion on that, or if it's.
yeah, and then, and what's your motion going to be, as Ron would say?
My motion's going to be to forward a copy of this to the board of the Pennington County Housing and request them to provide us feedback as to their findings concerning what is listed in this letter.
Second.
Motion and a second, discussion. From the public? The commission? All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Items from planning and zoning, the next item, 20, wants to postpone this until July 3rd, so Canadian Pacific can be here. I think we need a motion to approve that.
Motion to go into a board of adjustment.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Discussion on the going into a board of adjustment. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Now, do we just want to make a motion to do this, or do we want to discuss it, or how do we want
Make a
to?
motion to continue those A, B, and C variances until the July 3rd, 2012 commission meeting.
I would second that motion. Is there discussion? All in favor of that motion on the floor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Need a motion to come out.
Motion to come out, yeah,
Board of
board
Adjustment.
of adjustment.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion on that item. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, the Board of Commissioners uses its consent agenda to act on non-controversial and routine planning and zoning items. The consent agenda is acted upon by one motion and vote of the board. Anyone may remove an item from the consent agenda and discuss it in an open meeting and place it on the regular agenda. So the next items are D, E, F, G, H, I, and J are all on the consent calendar. Does anybody have a Will, to pull anything off of that consent agenda? Okay, go ahead, Dan, if you,
Those be read into the.
yes, I was going to have Dan read them in, yep. Go ahead, Dan.
Item D is the Spring Creek Watershed Management and Project Implementation Plan. Approval of the advisory group recommendations, and approval is recommended. Item E is a preliminary plat 12-21 for Dwight and Mary Johnson, and approval is recommended. Item F is a preliminary plat 12-13 for Marv and Chris Mackins, and this is recommended to be continued to the 7/17/12 commission meeting. Item G is a layout plat 12-20 for Roger and Debbie Syke, and approval is recommended. Item H is a minor plat 12-14 and subdivision regulation variance 12-04 for Canadian Pacific Railroad. Fisk Land serving as the agent is also recommended to be continued to the July 3rd, 12 commission meeting. Item I is a minor plat, 12-15, any subdivision regulation variance, 12-05, Canadian Pacific Railroad, Fisk Land serving as the agent, also to be continued to the July 3rd commission meeting. Item J is a minor plat, 12-16, and a subdivision regulation variance, 12-06, Canadian Pacific Railroad, Fisk Land serving as the agent, also to be continued to the July 3rd, 12 commission meeting.
After Dan has read the consent agenda, is there any changes? Does anybody want to pull anything off the consent agenda? Okay, need a motion.
Move to approve the consent agenda for planning and zoning as presented.
Second.
Motion and a second, discussion. All in favor of the item, say aye. Aye. Aye, opposed? Motion carried. And item K.
This is the first reading in the public hearing of rezoning request 12-04 and a comprehensive plan amendment 12-02, Todd Munyon, Main Street Motors, to rezone 0.15 acres from limited ag and 2.45 acres from general ag to general commercial district, and to amend the comprehensive plan to change the future land use map from suburban residential district to general commercial district. This item was continued from the June 7th Board of Commissioners meeting, and Planning Commission had recommended denial of this back about a month ago. I believe this was continued based upon you wanted some more discussion and possibly some other options for him to allow for the car rental lot on the property. Discussing this with our state's attorney and all my staff, we feel there is really no other option. Home occupation was talked about, but that's just not really an option at all on this property. So the only option is that it be rezoned to general commercial to allow for this car lot to be on this property.
Okay, further discussion. Questions of Dan?
Dan, as you go on down 44 where that trailer park is, what's that zoned as?
It'd have to be rezoned or zoned a suburban residential district and have a conditional use permit if it were to go that way today. I'm not exactly sure what it's zoned right now, but it might be a grandfathered use. But more than likely, it's zoned suburban residential district.
And that's an allowable, that is an allowable function for a suburban residential list?
With approval of a conditional use permit, it is allowable.
What type of zoning do we have that would allow a trailer court?
Suburban residential district?
With the conditional use?
Yes, or a planned unit development.
Okay.
Further discussion. Input from the public?
My other question, I guess, is the tanks that are right across the highway from that location, those propane tanks. Is that a residential area as well?
It's all within the railroad right-of-way, and right now I don't believe it's even zoned anything.
But it's a commercial operation in the railroad right-of-way, huh?
It is a commercial kind of an ag, commercial type use within that right away.
And there's no railroad going there anymore.
No,
But the railroad still owns it?
I believe the state of South Dakota owns it right now.
Okay. And the fire station that's just down the road from, or just up to the west of where this property is, what is that zoned as?
I believe that's zoned, looks like a general ag, and they do have to also have a conditional use permit in order to have a fire station on the property.
What kind of zoning allows without
Residential.
without a conditional use permit?
Oh, without a conditional use permit, probably general commercial or highway service.
And I think you told us last time that the city's long-range plan calls for this to be commercial?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Further questions of Dan? Okay, Dan, you have a gentleman behind you that'd like to.
Good morning. I'm Todd Munyon with Main Street Motors. I appreciate you bringing up the fire department and the propane tanks. And my partners and I are trying to look at this objectively, but we're having trouble understanding. I know the fire station and the propane tanks aren't zoned commercial, but they make for a commercial look on that highway. And the city's plan has that as commercial, and I know this isn't the city, we're still in the county. But that corridor on that busy highway is just not very conducive to residential development. There aren't very many residential houses along there. And we've been told that the property's too small, when clearly I don't really think that's the issue, because there's many small commercial properties along Highway 44. And I don't believe it's a remote location. That's a high traffic area, so I would just ask the board to consider maybe being more in line with the city's plan, especially with the water line coming in there later. We're not trying to disrupt a tranquil neighborhood. We just want to run a small business there. And if someday the business changed, we would certainly be under all the commercial guidelines that are already in place. So we're not trying to ruin the rural area, but the current zoning of ag, it's too small for ag right now. And it's not very good for residential either, in our opinion. So, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I have another question for Dan. Dan? So obviously, if we would approve this as the applicant is requesting, then that's that spot zoning that you've tried to educate me on.
Yes.
And the other thing we could do is do the conditional use permit for it. Is that right?
No, not in this case. The general commercial is the only use. If it's rezoned to general commercial, he does not need a conditional use permit. It's just an allowed use within that zoning district. So once you approve it, he could start.
We couldn't approve the conditional use permit to allow him to do it on that.
No, it's not an allowed conditional use in that residential zoning district.
Okay.
I have a question if you're done.
Yeah.
Good.
This, from your report, it's 1 mile to the nearest commercial zoning is 1 mile to the west and 3 miles to the east. So this is right in the middle of, I mean, if even if the city said it should be commercial along there, they mean, I believe, that you start and you move your way out. You don't go right in the middle and piecemeal this thing.
Correct.
You start and you gradually do it as you go out. So that's.
Yeah, it kind of, as growth happens, the comprehensive plan would change and, shift the zoning to what's appropriate as to what's coming closer to it.
Further discussion? Yes, sir.
Can I just add one comment that with the fire station, 1/4 mile to the west and the propane tanks very close on the other side of the street. Even though that fire station is not commercial, there can't be residential in there. I mean, in my opinion, this is the first property on that side of those that would grow out toward the airport. I don't see any other property in between the fire station. We have the ditch and there's a street going up back to a residential area. So the quarter mile between this property and the fire station, this is the first property. And nobody's gonna build houses by the propane tanks on the other side of the street. And again, I'm trying to look at that objectively, not just because I own the property, but that looks like that's how that growth would work.
Dan, is that a concrete operation that's along Longview and Reservoir and 44 in that triangle? Is that zoned commercial, or is that?
No, it's not. It's a grandfathered use in that location.
Kind of looks commercial though, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Just, I believe the propane tanks were put out there because they were an offload off the railroad at the time we had a railroad going through there. But it also was a safety factor to get those tanks away from the residential community, I believe.
And I believe it is an agricultural
But it's
use.
still, yeah, but that's, yeah, so. Further discussion? Does anybody want to hazard the motion?
Sure, I'll make a motion to deny it.
Do we have a second? I'll second it. Do we have further discussion?
How many votes are we gonna need for this?
3 votes.
I would like to see him be able to sell cars out there, but I also have a difficult time with the spot zoning. I just think that you have convinced me that that's not a good idea. So I'll probably be supporting this motion, even though I think it would probably fit into that area fairly well. I wish there was a conditional use permit we could do with it, but apparently we can't.
Further discussion? From the public? From the commission? All in favor of the motion on the floor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. Committee reports. Nancy, do you have anything?
The County Mountain Pine Beetle met yesterday, and next week, I think I've got, maybe we'll just put one there for Lindell's too. Next week, on the 26th of June, we're going to meet in Keystone and talk about what the county is doing as far as disaster relief and what's available in services as far as mountain pine beetle, and if there is a disaster, what we would have available for people. So Keystone is the 26th. Oh, I might have that wrong. I might have that turned around. Keystone's Monday. Okay, yeah, is that the 26th? Okay. From 5:30 to 6:30 at the community center, and also in Hill City, the same thing on Tuesday, the 27th, from 5:30 to 6:30. And we've got several of our county offices are going to give a presentation the first half hour, and then we'll leave time for questions and concerns and so on. So I'd like to invite all of you there if you can come. We're going to have talks from the sheriff's office, the fire department, and the county fire, emergency management, and weed and pest. And purpose is just to let people know that we are indeed able to do everything, or we are indeed doing everything we can to keep them safe and to provide help with eradication of the mountain pine beetle. So that would be the big thing.
I heard a very interesting guy on the radio this morning talking about cutting and chunking, and that it's all relative to when it's done. If you do it at a certain time, it kills most of them in there. If you do it at a different time, he said it does absolutely nothing.
And we have always set those kind of time limits, and the reason is because when they cut and chunk, this, portion of the log that is exposed on the top needs to reach a certain high temperature. So it does no good to cut them and expect that to happen in the winter, because it will not kill the bugs. And then the other thing that is important is that they roll it so that the underside now reaches that high temperature during the summer months, and then it kills the bugs.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff I didn't know, and they said, it's the same with spraying, you gotta do it at a certain time, otherwise you're just throwing your money away.
Yeah, that's right. That's why Scott always puts those time limits on it, and hopefully people try to do something in those time limits, that's the reason. And Dustin also is gonna be on, was that Don Grant's show?
Yeah, it was.
Because Dustin is also gonna be on there and talk about preparing for disaster and what you should do for your packet, or your kit, that's the word I want to use, to take with you when you're ready to leave if you have to. So,
Well, I see in the journal that there's a group now that they're, since they haven't had any success of stopping from cutting logs to kill the bugs, now we find we have a woodpecker in the Black Hills that may be an endangered species.
and technically, that woodpecker is the only natural thing that will attack a mountain pine beetle. That's our only defense naturally.
We need to import them.
Import them.
Yeah, that I jokingly said that to the Forest Service.
And in 10 years, we'll have a.
What happened to the spotted owl? Won't they eat bug larvae?
infestation.
No, they don't peck into the wood because of the way they get underneath there.
I'll be quiet, thank you.
Yep, I know.
Don?
When humans
Done.
start interfering, no.
Well, I'll make it easy, I'm done. Items from the public. We'll stand right up there and just. Okay, nothing, we do not have an executive session today. Okay,
right.
so
I'll
I
make the
need a
motion to
motion to,
Second.
motion and second to adjourn. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
I
Opposed?
know I do.